Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we share all things people stuff in leadership. Learn from leaders who have done the hard yards and learn from experience. Hear from expert authors about the latest insights from culture to strategy and messy people dynamics. Get tips and insights from multiple award-winning author and leadership expert herself, Zoe Routh. Now, on with the show.
Hi, it's Zoe. What can a stuntman teach us about mastering fear and developing high performance with our teams in uncertainty? Well, as it turns out, quite a lot. This is an amazing interview, and my guest today is John Davis. He has a background as a stuntman, a fight director, a college professor, artistic director, and comedian. He is a fascinating guest. He has also developed a 5F system of achievement, which talks about how we can hack our fight or flight response system and also shorten learning curves. Like, how good is that? So we walk through the 5F system in quite a lot of detail in this wide-ranging conversation. It's not even wide-ranging. It's a deep conversation. We talk about an incident he had when he was 22 where he broke his back and became paralyzed and how he overcame that. He went on to do a whole bunch of sword fighting comedy shows, which just the idea of swords and comedy, I think, is hilarious. Over 4,000 live shows around the world, including 6 United States USO tours. I believe that's when he goes to the United States, the fronts, to see American troops in Afghanistan and Iraq between 2001 and 2006, took his comedy show down there. Now he works a lot in the corporate world as a keynote speaker, as well as a facilitator. I loved this conversation. It was fascinating. We went deep into spirituality, mind-body connection, and how to overcome some key obstacles, as well as reach pinnacle peak states. So yeah, you're in for a treat today. Let's do it.
I'm from Delaware, so yeah, and my mom taught me well, so I say yes, ma'am, to every woman that I talk to. Yes, ma'am.
I love it. I think that's great. So welcome to the show, John Davis, all the way from Ohio, and you can say yes, ma'am, to me anytime. I love
it. well, thank you. It's really good to be here.
Now, I'm super excited. You've got so many different strings to your bow and threads of your story. It's... Well, where to start? Let's start with how you brand yourself, the corporate action hero. What's up with that? Where did that come from?
Well, when I was a young man, I wanted to be a stuntman and a fight director. And I went off and after some traumatic injury made me change the way I viewed life. I did go off and become a stuntman and a fight director. But that injury gave me an opportunity to actually learn a skill to help people achieve more in their life. And what happened was I discovered I was doing my stunt work, and I did a comedy show called Hack and Slash, and it was a sword fighting comedy show. And what I discovered was I was really...
Because sword fighting is hilarious.
Oh, yeah, it was hysterical. Well, the basis of that show was hysterical because it was based on Commedia dell'arte, and I was a knight who got hit in the head with a cannonball and saw everything 6 inches to the left. So the sword fights were very funny. But I ended up discovering that I was enjoying the time after the show more than I was doing the shows, because after the shows I'd sit in the audience for hours and I'd help people achieve their goals, and I'd started teaching them the techniques that I learned to get out of that bed years before. So I said, okay, so I like to do whips, I like to do nunchucks, I like to do crazy things like that, but I also like to help people. So what can I do? So I created the Corporate Action Hero, where I go into corporations all over the world. I've been to 30 countries so far. I go in there and I do a live presentation where I empower that audience to realize how they can leverage their present moment, set their fears, self-doubts, and limitations behind, and achieve peak performances in half the time.
Yeah, excellent spiel. I love it. And what a great story. And I want to come back to the first part, though. Like, what made you decide you want to become a stuntman?
Well, when I was a kid, I was an Errol Flynn fan. I wanted to be Robin Hood, swinging from trees with swords in my hand. And I ended up later in life when I was in my early 20s, I got drugged to a Renaissance festival, and I met 2 of the top fight directors in the world. And, when you get focused really, really solidly on a future that you want, things get laid before you in your path to help you achieve that. So these two gentlemen saw that I had talent, saw that I had passion, and they gave me all their training for free. And I got really involved in that. And then I got into martial arts because I knew that having a martial arts background would be very helpful as well. What I ended up doing was moving out and going and doing that work. And then I had, like I said, I had that one incident with my back, and that kind of changed my whole trajectory for a short time.
So those kind of incidents, these cataclysmic events, can be very confronting. What happened to you? And you said it changed your whole perspective on life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I was very well on the way to doing that stunt work. And what happened was I found myself literally picking up a box out of a friend's van, helping him move. And I turned to set the box down, and my upper body separated from my lower body, and I collapsed and was paralyzed. And they took me to the hospital. The doctor said,
wow,
John, you have a condition known as spina bifida occulta, which basically means 3 of my vertebrae never formed properly at birth. And so because they didn't form properly at birth, that day with that extra weight, when I twisted, I literally broke my spine in half. And the doctor told me that day in the hospital, you will never, ever be a fight director. You'll never be a stuntman. You'll never have a physical career. And because of that, I went to a very deep and dark place. That was my goal in life, was to do that work.
Sure.
And as I sat there, I decided that this was a different direction that I wanted to head. And so I decided I couldn't let somebody else tell me what I was going to do. And then somebody came in and gave me a book. And and at the time, you would have thought that book was a cruel joke, but it wasn't a cruel joke. He gave me a book by Bruce Lee called The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Now, here's a guy who was just told he'll never do fight direction or never do martial arts again, and they gave him a book called The Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee. Well, Bruce Lee wrote that book when he was in traction in the hospital, and he ended up writing that book at a time when he was just told he would never do martial arts and never, ever lift a weight again. And so what happened was I'm reading this book, and I found this whole thing in there about mental flexibility, about staying flexible whenever there's a time of adversity. And so I started leveraging my present moment, because that was another part of that book, was staying firmly present. So I started saying, okay, I have made a new choice. My choice is I am going to be that stuntman and fight director, and I am going to stay very focused. I'm going to take this as a catalyst to move forward instead of an obstacle to stop me. And I just started leveraging my present moment. So at day one, I started with flexing my upper back muscles, and I slowly worked my way down my back until one day I was flexing my hip muscles, and the doctors were like, you can't do that. It's not possible because your spine's pinched off. And the next thing you know, I was bending my waist, and the next thing you know, I was bending my knees and then my ankles. And then, to make a long story short, 1 year and 6 months later, I was standing on top of a 3-story tower, and I jumped off and landed on a fall pad.
Oh my God. I'd be happy just to walk down the hospital corridor. Let's just jump out of a building. Wow, that is really remarkable. So I'm curious, like just the medical aspect of that. So the doctor said that's impossible. Did they have an explanation physiologically of how you managed to do that? Was it just a focus of your brain reconnecting the circuitry of your spine?
They actually are. It's kind of interesting. They're almost in denial that I exist. They don't want to talk about it at all, and they really kind of stopped contacting or talking with me about it. Because what happened was I went off and I literally did over 4,000 live comedy sword fighting shows all over the world, including the front lines of Iraq and Afghanistan on 6 USO tours. So I was jumping in and out of helicopters and doing shows. And so I had a very, very physical career. And they had told me there was no physical career left in my future at 22 years old. So they kind of felt a little wonky about it. But one of the things that they did want back then, they wanted to put pins in my back to hold my spine together. And I knew that if I did that, then my career was done, because a rigid part of your back doesn't flex when you do falls, rolls, or any of that kind of work. And so rather than that, I started studying yoga, and I started doing weight exercises for my lower back, and I actually built up my back muscles to the point where still today, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I still have the condition, and my lower back is held together by the musculature that holds it there.
Hey, that's amazing. So you went on to do these comedy shows after that accident?
After that accident. I did over 4,000 shows after that accident.
That's remarkable. And then over to visit the U.S. troops in war-torn countries.
Yeah. And some of that was crazy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Which is a nice segue into the theme of this quarter for the podcast, which is leading in uncertainty. And I can't think of a more uncertain area of the world to be in than in a war zone. And there you are, giving a live comedy show. What did you learn about the men and women who serve and work in that kind of fraught conditions? What did you observe? And that's the second part of the question. You're not supposed to ask double-barrel questions. Maybe I'll just stop there.
No, go ahead. Feel free.
So what did you learn about them? And then the next thing is, how did you help them?
Okay, this is great. Okay, so they taught me so much, and I can't tell you how much they taught me because they were a huge part of the rest of my life. Because getting out of that hospital bed, I learned mental flexibility. Studying what the soldiers did in the field and what the stuntmen were doing in Hollywood, I started to see the pattern that created what I call the 5 Fs, which is hacking that fight or flight response. I talk to the soldiers, I say, how do you know that you're going to be okay when you go into a firefight, a situation where you're going to get shot at or possibly blown up? And they say the first thing they do is they had to compartmentalize their fear. They had to set their fears aside. So the technique that they use is to exhale. Then the stuntmen do the same thing. They exhale. And then I started noticing that in Hollywood, they teach actors, and on Broadway, the actors use the same technique. Like if an actor's on stage and they forget their lines, they're trained to exhale. So my studies took me into the brain science of why would that work? And then I discovered the fight or flight response, the first reaction of the fight or flight response is to go gasp for air. And you fill your lungs up. Well, most people, when they're in a fear response, the first thing they do is they think they can't breathe. And it's not that they can't breathe, it's that their body is conserving air so they can run further and faster. And so they have tons of air. They're just not letting anything out. And so by the exhaling, you release the primal fight or flight response, which shuts off the fear response. And then the next thing was that the soldier said to me that it was easy for him to set that fear aside because he also had an objective to focus on, and the stuntman on top of the tower looking down, he's not focused on the tower. He's focused on where he's going to land, because if he jumps off that tower, he doesn't want to hit the tower, right?
Yeah.
So you have to get that positive focus about where you're headed. And, when you're leading somebody through a stressful situation, understanding from an empathetic point of view where they are on the fear scale and addressing their fears directly and then giving them a positive focus is the first of my 2 5 Fs, the fearlessly focus, and then building them up with positive reinforcement. These soldiers had leaders. You always see in the movies the leaders yelling and screaming at their soldiers, but that's not the way it was. It was constant positive reinforcement. So they were building these people up in their faith in self. And so they got fearlessly focused with faith. So now there's 3 of the 5 Fs, right? You want to stop there or you may go on?
No, I'm just making notes. Fearlessly focused with faith.
Fearlessly focused with faith.
And the faith is?
The faith of confidence in self.
Okay, thank you.
Confidence, but not a spiritual faith. But, a lot of people find their confidence in their spiritual faith. Wherever you find it is fine, but it's belief in the outcome, belief that you can get that outcome done.
Yeah.
Then the next one's the hard one. The next one's the one that where everybody kind of struggles, and it's follow through. Simply following through. Taking an action that is based in fearlessly focusing with faith. That first action. And if you don't take an action, it's because you're in a fear response there as well. So you have to go back and adjust what that fear is. But once you start taking small present moment actions, what happens is you create a whole different outcome. Because we live in a conscious present moment, and the conscious present moment is the only moment we live. The past is just a collection of memories of present moments that you've lived. The future is a place where you set goals for present moments you're going to live in the future. They're coming to you. So you've got to get very, very focused on the present moment and make this small moment successful. When I was doing my back injury, I had to make the flexing of the muscles very successful and let these small present moments stack. Right? When I'm leading somebody through a stressful situation, I'll give you an example. When I do my corporate action hero speech, the final thing I do on stage is I bring the most timid person in my audience I can find to the stage. Well, the first fear they have is they're in front of all their peers.
Oh, yeah.
And so first thing I do, I get them on stage and I go, thank you so much for coming. I start giving positive reinforcement with head nods and smiles. And then I turn to the audience and say, isn't she a rock star? And I get all this positive reinforcement and real support from her team, right? So that really helps. Then I want to get her to, the thing that's going to happen is she's going to crack a whip and she's going to take a target out of my hand, right? So I get her talking about fishing. I don't talk about whips because whips brings up a fear. Whips brings up, pain or danger, or, whatever imagery, whips put in your head. So
how do you know what's in my head?
I'm not saying anything. Not saying nothing.
Who's been talking to you?
Anyway, so we'll move on.
Good idea.
Right. So I don't want them having those kind of images. What I want them to have is calm and serene. So I just start talking about fishing. I said, you know what? Why don't I show you the best way to cast a fishing rod? And I pull out a bullwhip. And then I just keep saying, no, this is a fishing rod. I just want you to think about a fishing rod because it's the same action. And then I get, and they're like, I said, well, just relax, take a breath, breathe. They go to a section of the audience. I point at the audience and I say, you guys over here, put your hands under your chin like your gills and guppy your lips and become her fish. And she starts laughing. Now I'm creating a positive work environment, right? She's having a good time. I said, now all you got to do is choose which fish you want to catch and cast your fishing rod. And you know what happens? She cracks a whip. Kapow! It cracks really loud. After I get her to do it 2 or 3 times, I say, that was awesome. Now you've learned a skill. We've got to take you out of your comfort zone and give you something new to use that skill for. And I pull a target out. Well, now what's her new fear? As a leader, my job is to know that. Her fear is she's going to hit me. Right?
Yeah.
She's afraid of hitting me. So I look her in the eye and I say, look at me. Did you hear it crack? She goes, yeah. So you already know how to make it crack. She says, yes. And I say that 3 different times. You already know how to make it crack. I'm creating an anchor to get her out of learning the skill to knowledge of the skill. I'm shifting her timeline. Then I get to the point where I say, I promise you're not going to hurt me. Because I don't want her thinking she's going to hurt me. Right? Now, in my show, after it's all done, I jokingly say, sometimes when you're leading somebody through stress, you got to lie to them. Right? But the thing is, as a leader, my job is to meet them empathetically, especially when they're in a stressful situation, meet them in an empathetic place and realize that I can't expect them to be where I want them to be. I have to lead them from where they are. That's what the word leader means, is someone who meets them where they are and brings them along. And so you have to make sure you're meeting them where they are in the middle of that stress and saying, okay, this is their fear, identify it, and then walk them out of it.
So presumably she hits the target and doesn't hurt you.
She has not hurt me once. I'm kidding.
Is that your missing finger you're showing me there?
Yeah, no, it's fine. I have them all. I have all 5 digits. If this was video, that would be really funny.
It's still funny. So that makes, that's a wonderful process. I love all the techniques that you shared in there in great detail. It works obviously in a trained performance situation. How does it work when we have leaders in their teams who are all uncertain of the outcome? How can they then deal with that situation? There's one thing to have the leader who knows how to do the thing to lead somebody through it, like whatever the task is. What about if the leader and their team, they've never confronted this situation before, say COVID, and there's a lot of fear and uncertainty there? How would you recommend leaders apply that to that situation, leading their teams through that initial paralysis and uncertainty?
Okay, well, you've said the word a few times. You said fear, you said paralysis, you said uncertainty. Let's just take a second just to define what fear is, because fear is an emotional reaction to some future event that may or may not happen with you focused on a negative outcome. So if you are in fear, you are negatively focused, right? So it really is just negatively focused uncertainty. So if you're in an uncertain place and they're in an uncertain place, that's fine. That's a great place to start as a leader to go, look, we're all in this together. I'm just as uncertain as you. Take the hierarchy out of it and say, we're going to go through this and you're going to have to me and I'm going to have to help you. You can use that as a leverage point to say, look, we need to get together. When I used to direct Renaissance festivals years ago, I became known as the guy who would save Renaissance festivals. I would come in after somebody had run it into the ground and they were losing money, and I would come in and I would completely turn the dynamic of the festival. I had one festival that I directed that had a 60% growth in a single year. And
Wow.
what happened was I came in and I just started looking at the dynamic of the team. And I started saying, hey, guys, I'm with you. You know, I let them know the festival's having struggle and we can bring it back. And I would enlist them into the actual ownership of bringing it back and the pride of bringing it back. You know, in ancient Egypt, there was a pharaoh named Sneferu. And Sneferu, his famous...
What a great name.
Isn't that a great name? Sneferu, right? And Sneferu is famous because he made Egypt the largest empire in the world during his reign. And when you ever read anything about Sneferu, he called everybody he met his brother and his friend. And when anybody tried to invade his area, he literally said, look what they're doing to our empire, our country. Look what they're doing to our Egypt. He enlisted the ownership of the team into the growth. Now, how do you enlist ownership? To get ownership enlisted in a team that's uncertain, especially, you need to demonstrate the purpose. And I don't mean the business purpose. I mean their personal purpose. You need to say, how does this benefit you? Because every country I've ever been in, I've asked the audiences, what's the most important thing in your life? They have never, ever once said my job. They have always said my family. And so if you can demonstrate with them, listen, if we're going to take this forward, well, the company will grow, we'll be able to, give you increases in pay or, bonuses or however compensation you're going to do that. But you need to let them see the value that they're going to get to that will hit their most important purpose.
So that's the purpose piece. So
did I take a purpose piece away?
No. I'm just capturing your process for the listeners. And so what I heard is let's defuse the fear concept and say it's uncertainty is just a response to something that we're imagining. So let's just be presently focused. And then let's make it purposeful. So you're working through your 5 F's, fearlessly focused with faith.
Right.
And then it's the follow through.
Right.
Did I miss an F? 1, 2,
well,
3, 4.
There's one more that at the end, which let me go through this process we're going through now.
Okay.
And I'll bring out the final one. So we talked about fearlessness, right? Now that purpose is their focus, right?
Yeah.
Faith is the next one in the 3 in this process. So in the faith piece of this, what I'm doing is just, okay, let's just take this a little piece at a time and make these small successful moments. Let's just do this. And if we get a process that doesn't go right way, instead of beating ourselves up about it and giving our self-limiting talk or saying we're so dumb, let's just think it's silly and keep moving, right? Start stacking small present moments, because the reality of it is no great success or no big change has ever happened magically in your present moment. It only happens by the present moments that you stack anyway. And no great big success has ever happened without change as well. So change is nothing to be feared. It's something to be embraced and actually said, okay, this is going to take us to another level. So we got fearlessly focused with faith. Those small little pieces build, which creates subconscious belief of success, which changes the whole dynamic of the picture. Fearlessly focused with faith. And we get them to follow through. Those small moments are the follow through. And the interesting thing is when they start seeing those small successes, trust is developed by results over time. So the more they see these results stacking as present moment successes, what happens is they come out the other side. They go, I trust that I can do this. I trust that I'm successful. You're building confidence as you go. The cool part is that when you start stacking those in your past belief, your subconscious belief, the way your conscious mind works is you focus on something and the subconscious mind will help you or will show you that. So if you know a negative person, they always have something to be negative about because they're focused on the negative, right? If you've ever bought a car or you decided what kind of car you liked, you notice you start seeing that kind of car all over the place because you're consciously focused so that car starts to show up. So when you're stacking these present moments back here and they're more and more positive, the hue of your subconscious belief becomes more and more positive. So you got fearlessly focused with faith. Follow through is now done. The next one is the final F, and it's flexibility. When something comes up in that pathway of creation, we have to make sure that we stay flexible. See, I'm a firm belief that when I set a goal, I achieve it, period. And if something comes up that seems contrary to what it's going to do, I believe my subconscious mind has shown it to me because I have to address it or solve it or cast it aside to get to my goal, because I never take my eye off the goal. I always stay focused on that outcome, and something comes up. It's just part of the process of getting it. And if you can keep your people focused on the fact that we're going to have struggles, it's going to happen, happens every time. But those struggles are just part of the process to get where we want to go.
That's a good reframe of those obstacles, because they can be quite deflating if you're having one obstacle after another, that's for sure. So I'm putting together, piecing together in my mind how you've layered and built this whole framework through your extensive experience. You've had the martial arts with what kind of martial arts did you practice, by the way?
I did Taekwondo and Shorin-ryu. And if you go to my website, you'll find videos of me doing nunchucks in my speeches too.
What's your website?
corporateactionhero.com.
Okay. So we can see you doing your martial arts in action. So you had that piece there. Then you studied yoga for mind-body connection and flexibility and body awareness, I'm guessing.
Yeah, yep.
And it sounds a little bit like neuro-linguistic programming as well. Did you do NLP, or is there something else that you've been studying?
I did some NLP. I never went for my master practitioner, but I did study NLP. I also studied hypnosis.
Oh, really?
Hypnosis is actually probably more valuable than NLP, because the anchoring and the reframing that you do with hypnosis is actually really fast. Like when I talk to the person on the stage about the fishing and all that, and then the anchoring of the you already know how to make it crack is all that came from the hypnosis training rather than the NLP.
Yeah, right. Because NLP uses a little bit of anchoring as well.
Right. Hypnosis, we do this thing called a hypnotic wipe. And basically it's a gesture where you raise your hand and you drop it like, oh, stop. If you've ever done that, oh, stop, right? And in hypnosis, we go, say, for instance, so did you hear the whip crack? So you already know how to make it crack.
Oh, yeah, right.
And I'm wiping away, positive reinforcing, and putting the new information in right behind.
Ah, okay. So you do those simultaneously, like take away the bad stuff or this obstacle and say, you already know how to do it. And that's that. So for people listening to the audio, this is like taking your hand and gesturing palm out towards the other person and just wiping, like as if you're wiping their face. Not quite in their face.
Almost everybody has done this gesture. When someone gives you a big compliment and you get embarrassed, you go, oh, stop, and you throw your hand down. That's the same exact gesture. It's oh,
yeah,
stop. Right. Say, oh, stop,
And subconsciously, what are you doing there? Are you denying the compliment by doing that?
In one way, but you're trying to stop the embarrassment on a psychological level. You're trying to stop, you're embarrassing me, right? You're trying to wipe the embarrassment away. But in reality, what you're doing, they call it a hypnotic wipe, where you're actually literally wiping away by saying, for instance, the whip thing. Did you hear it crack? And I get her to give me a positive yes. I go, yeah. Okay. So you already know how to make it crack. And what that does, it literally reframes her mind from learning the skill to knowledge of the skill. I just basically shorten the learning curve down to 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's really cool. And the nodding that you're doing as you're asking both questions reinforces that as well, sort of encourages subconscious anchoring.
Positive reinforcement all the way through.
Yeah, right.
And as a leader, it's funny. I know a lot of leaders who are very strong, very tough on their teams. And my father used to say many years ago, one oh crap wipes out 1,000 attaboys. And right. But the thing is, you have to give the 1,000 attaboys for the other one to have effect. Because if you're giving 1,000 oh craps, one attaboy doesn't mean a thing. You have to constantly give positive reinforcement to your team and build them up, because what they really want is a positive experience and a positive work environment. So when you're trying, like when I'm working with stuntmen, one of the first things I do with stuntmen, and I bring them in, I have a team of them there, and I say, all right, everybody raise your right hand. They all raise their right hand. I said, repeat after me. And they, of course, say, repeat after me, and we all laugh about that, right? And then I go, I will not delve into fault or guilt. And they go, I will not delve into fault or guilt. Because when you delve into fault and guilt, you're casting blame and judgment. And what happens is that wastes the next moment. In stunt work, when we're doing, let's say, for instance, we're doing a fight scene or two guys fighting, and one guy swings wild and almost hits the other guy. If that guy drops into fault and guilt, the first thing he says is, hey, you almost hit me. How dare you? Blah, 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 blah. Now the other person has to get defensive. Now the whole process is slowed down. And when you're in film for a movie, when the camera's running, is $100,000 a minute. Okay, so
oh my goodness,
yeah. So you can't waste those minutes, right? So we have to get them to the point where they're going, okay, you know. So what I have my guys do now is they, instead of going, say, hey, I thought I saw it this way. Can we look at that? And the other person's job is to say, yeah, sure. And support each other through the process. And think of everything as just information, because everybody that you work with in life is fallible. And guess what? So are you. And so you have to give yourself permission to be fallible and give others to be the same permission that you give yourself.
That's really fascinating in the stuntman situation, because you can really hurt one another, I'm guessing, if you get offline or whatever. So to stay in a positive place about, I saw your fist coming towards my nose and it connected. Let's talk about that.
Sometimes accident happens. It's less likely in a stage scenario than it is for a film scenario. In stage, you have many more weeks of rehearsal, and your choreography is done in such a way that it's blocked for the audience, and you literally have to be able to perform it for the run of an entire show. Whereas in stunt work, you learn the skill, you practice it up, and then you have like one or possibly 2 or 3 shots to get the fight scene on film looking good.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So they do deserve recognition in Hollywood. I know there's a big campaign to get stunt people recognized for their work.
They definitely should be. There has not been a film made in Hollywood where somebody did not bleed.
Literally. Are you talking about like a stunt person bleeding literally accidentally or on purpose?
Accidentally. Accidents happen on every action movie that's ever happened. They fall the wrong way. They scrape their arm. Somebody gets hit by a sword. You watch the movie Lord of the Rings. Even actors do it. Viggo Mortensen, the famous scene where the 2 hobbits, he thinks that the orcs had killed them and took them off, and he turns around and he kicks this helmet. Well, he broke his toe when he kicked the helmet, and in the film he screams, he drops to his knees. But he also knows that he can't mess up the take because it's $100,000 a minute. So he kicks, he screams, he drops to his knees, and he sits there, and the scene's dramatic, and everybody's like, wow, that was really dramatic. And then the EMTs came and fixed his foot. Right? But that's the way it is in Hollywood. Those things just happen.
So he's sitting there like looking dramatic is because he's just smashed the bejesus out of his toe.
Right.
And he's having a pondering and gather myself moment. I love it. Wow, that's fascinating. So in the work that you still do performances around the world, assuming recommencement of travel. Do you also work with leaders and their teams in like scenarios that you described?
Yeah, actually I do. I'm really fortunate because right now I'm really starting to see the light at the end of our COVID tunnel, because I'm starting to get calls for more and more speaking events, and things are starting to open up here. And this company is coming out, they're a new industry, and they have 14 stores open, and they're changing their entire model. And so there's a whole bunch of change and anxiety, and I'm going out and I'm working for them for a day. I do a full day workshop. I also have a workshop I do with another speaker. Her name's Tamara Zoner, and hers is all about the positive work culture. So I come in, I charge them up, then she talks to them about the idea of keeping them in that positive space. Then I come back again and I do an effective communication and emotional intelligence workshop, and I get them on their feet moving that, and then we close it out together with a really cool ending. But it's a full day workshop that we do.
That's fantastic. So it's getting people to master their fear response and get into a positive mindset and taking those immediate actions.
And it's for leaders especially.
Yeah, that's awesome. Coming back to the fundamental technique, breathing and present focus moment, what disciplines do you have to reinforce that? Do you have daily practices to help you remember those particular things for you personally?
I meditate twice a day, 45 minutes twice a day.
Wow.
I get up in the morning and I meditate 45. Well, that helps me because, when you're getting into a stressful mindset, you carry that stress in your back. So I like to keep myself as stress-free as possible because my back doesn't like those kinds of things. So I meditate in the morning and the evening, which is very important. I get my fearlessness comes from my spiritual belief. My background originally was in Christianity, but I've kind of been reformed from Christianity, and I now study all religions. And it's interesting because I found breath and breathing in all of them. And I also found things like the Buddha says, the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear, right? And what you think you become, you create your world. So there's a lot of those kind of thoughts that are in all of those pieces and parts anyway. What's really interesting is the more I study and the more I refine my 5F program, I find those truths in all of those other ancient resources. It's like they knew more than we did by far. And so I was able to tap into them. And actually, when I talk, I actually bring those quotes up and I say, look at this, because this is something that they did back then and I'm doing it now. And I found it naturally. I found it out of my need for something, which I found really fascinating that I found it too.
Yeah. Your friend giving you the Bruce Lee book as a starting point. And that kind of leads you into exploration of different other mind-body connection principles. What kind of meditation practice do you, you do it twice a day for 45 minutes, which is remarkable. Is there a specific methodology you use for it?
When I started with visualization meditations, then I went into breathing meditations, and now I've been doing it solo. I've been meditating now. See, I'm 57 years old, and I had my accident when I was 22, and I started meditating when I was 22. So I've been meditating for a while. So now there is no real practice for me anymore. I just basically sit down and align myself with that feeling of complete bliss, and I just kind of go there for 45 minutes. Back in the day, I needed to go through a process of actively thinking it into my body from the bottom up. And when I got into Kundalini yoga and all that, I had some rather interesting experiences on a spiritual level that changed a lot of my perspective as well about our interconnectedness and how we all are literally connected as one, and how my calmness and my sereneness affects those around me. And so it's interesting when I'm walking through like a store or something, I will literally pass somebody, and I always have a smile on my face typically. I'm just a smiley guy. When I walk through a store smiling, it's amazing to watch the people who do a double take and then smile, because they're not used to people smiling anymore, And so, but I just always smile, right? And so it's interesting how that serene place that I've found myself, when I walk by, I can literally see it affecting other people. And that's honestly the reason why I chose Tamra Zoner to work with as well, because, she's a happiness trainer is what she calls herself, positive work culture. And when I first met her, I was at a conference and she walked in the room and I watched the room change. I literally watched people get taller and perk up and joke with her and laugh with her. And I was like, all right, I got to find out who that is. And we have to work together, because that's the kind of feeling I have when I work as well.
Is she a meditator as well?
I'm pretty sure she probably is. I've never really, we actually, believe it or not, we do a spiritual podcast. I have a business podcast called The Interaction Hero, and we do a spiritual podcast where we both talk about our beliefs in spirituality called the Spirit Cafe podcast. And we go out and we talk about our own beliefs about spirituality and lots of different things.
That's fabulous. Can I ask you about your enlightenment experience as you described it? Well, I'm putting that label on it. You didn't. Where you had this experience of, can you talk about that? Or is it too personal for you?
No. I believe that the more people hear it, the more they'll try it and do it. It was early on in my meditation process. I was doing something that was akin to warming your body, is what they call it. But imagine lying flat on your back, and it's not a seated position, lying flat on your back and focusing your mind on warming up your feet. And when you feel the sensation in your feet, actively bring the heat up through your body. And so I was actually lying in a tent in New Orleans at the time. Actually, I was down there performing in a park, and they had a cold snap, the coldest it had ever been in New Orleans. And I'm lying in a tent, freezing my butt off. I said, well, this is a great time to do the warming meditation. So I'm lying there. And I brought this heat up my body, and it came all the way up to my chest. And it got to my chest and wouldn't go any higher. And at that point, I was like, why won't it go any higher? I was starting to feel that frustration, which is not a good place to be. And suddenly, it was almost like I heard a thought in my head that said, relax into it. And I just relaxed. And when I relaxed, my hands, which were lying like on my chest kind of, suddenly felt like as if they were out to my sides completely. This burst of heat rushed into my face. My eyes were closed, but all I saw was pure white light. And I literally felt connected to everything at an infinite distance from me. And it was so profound to realize that I had connected like that. And then the next night, I came out of that and I was very amazed by the whole situation. And the next night I was lying in that tent again, and I was sharing that tent with my comedy sword fighting partner. And I was in there trying to do it again because I wanted to do it again. And I'm sitting there doing it. And all of a sudden I hear the zipper of the tent open, and I open my eyes and I watched him step in the tent. And I watched him step right over top of me. And I looked at my own face because I wasn't in my body when he stepped over me. And so I had this these two experiences right on top of each other. And so I really realized how the body is just a vessel that we carry our consciousness in. And the night before, when I experienced that other part, was that we're all part of something much greater than ourselves. And so to affect the world, we have to step out into the world and be the change we want to see, as Gandhi would say. Literally be love, be that consciousness, be that source. And, when I talk in corporations, I don't talk this woo-woo, but when I do talk in corporations, I do emphasize the idea that you have to be that change you want to see in your people. You have to express it and be that essence of that successful outcome, that positive confidence, not only in yourself, but in them. You have to show it to them.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you had these two really woo-woo out there experiences and then getting up, packing up your tent and carrying on. What changed for you? Did anything change in terms of day-to-day focus, activity, or experience?
Everything got easier. Everything got smoother. That's the best way to say it. Everything got smoother. Even when things came along that seemed like they would be hard or harsh, I just flowed with them rather than actually fight against them. Shakespeare once said, "There's nothing good nor bad, but thinking makes it so." And your thought is a creative force. Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo astronaut, created a science called noetic science. And noetics, the reason he created the science is because he was traveling back to Earth on one of his missions, and he had a transcendental experience on the way back to Earth, and he decided he wanted to figure out what that was. So he started studying spiritual consciousness and combining it with real science, real data. And one of the things that they discovered was they can measure thought waves. They literally can measure the waves of thought. They also discovered that if you focus those thoughts on a specific point in space, there is a reaction there. So your thoughts are literally creative. And so what I'm seeing right now in the world of spirituality and science is the two of them are starting to marry. They're starting to come together and start to explain each other. Einstein, when he discovered everything that you see and experience in this world is made of atoms, and atoms aren't physical, they're an energy event, he came to the idea that he didn't believe in a deity God. He believed in the perfection of this universe and this place that we live can't be without some sort of conscious understanding or design. And so in his mind, there is a greater consciousness. See, and then in Hinduism, they believe that there is this giant outer rim of all of our experiences, that it's a collective pool of all experiences in the world. So you can find the same information everywhere, but now they're trying to verify it scientifically.
I love that you talk about noetic sciences and Edgar Mitchell. And in the research I did for my latest book, People Stuff, I have a whole chapter on this concept. And it's focusing on the perspective of us and expand your sense of us, and how so many astronauts had that experience, that looking back down on the planet and go, wow, we are all connected. So just like you did your heating up body exercise and had that sense of connectivity. Astronauts are so affected by the sense of awe that they have this experience, and many of them return to Earth and transform their focus, their purpose-driven focus, to, like Edgar Mitchell, set up a school that teaches a connection of all things, or they become environmentalists or something like that. There's been so many instances of that. And the science of awe is pretty interesting, where they talk about the frontal lobe activity decreases, and that gives us a sense of connectivity. So they're starting to link, as you said, the biology, the neuroscience to these spiritual practices. Whichever way you want to look at it, if you want to look at it through a spiritual lens or you want to look at it through a metaphysical one, the idea that we are happy people and we want show up in service and love is the main point.
Right.
I reckon.
My favorite Buddha quote of all time: when you realize how perfect everything is, you'll tilt your head back and laugh at the sky.
That's beautiful.
It's all the same stuff. It's just a matter of working with what you got. And what we got is, I'm going to get a little woo-woo on you here. I guess we're deep down that path now, though, aren't we?
Yeah, it's all good.
So I'm a firm believer that because everything is an energy event, there is a vibration. And that vibration, as defined by the Apostle John, is God. And God, as he said in the book of John, was God is love. So I often believe that we are here to experience our connection or experience what God truly is by having control of our own fear. And so imagine being immersed in God, but having a fog machine and your hand on the knob, and you can turn the fog of fear all the way up and not see it, or you can turn it down, you can put it down to almost nothing. But you can't, as Edgar Mitchell would say, you can't measure something without having a baseline to measure from. So you can't experience that source or that God energy without understanding the opposite. And the opposite of love is, of course, fear. And everybody says, well, no, it's hate. Well, hate is just a product of fear. If you're hating, it's because you fear something. So I live this principle of just be love. And when I feel myself in a negative state at all, I go, what is the fear? And I address the fear. And I turn my fog machine down just a little bit.
That's fantastic. What a great place to wrap up this interview, John. This has been a really special conversation. I thank you so much for coming on the show. It was so fabulous.
Oh, thank you. I had a great time. Very rare I get to talk my spiritual stuff. Usually I'm on business podcasts and I'm talking about, peak performances and getting your people to do this and all that. But I love having this kind of conversation. My favorite.
Oh, we did all of that. So I think it's been awesome. Thanks again.
Great. Thank you.
How much did I love that interview? That was so awesome. And this is one of the first times I'm really disappointed we didn't actually record video, because John has such a great demeanor. He does smile. He smiled the entire way through that entire recording. I felt calm and more peaceful just around him. And I was like, I want to be like John. It's just so good to be around him. I meditate once a day for 20 minutes, and this has inspired me to up my game. If it can help just shed fear, live in a better place of love, then I think it's well worth it. So lots to take away from this conversation, including increasing meditation, including biohacking fear with the breath and exhale. I think that was a great starting point. The 5 Fs are fabulous. John also told me after the recording that he has a free gift for everyone, and we'll put the link in the show notes. If you go to his website, you can go to corporateactionhero.com/free-gift-page.html. So you're never going to remember that, but we will have a link in the show notes for you. And the gift is the 5F workbook, which I'm going to go head over there right now and grab that for myself. The 5F workbook, you can get that free. You don't even have to opt in or anything. You just go and download, because he is awesome. Speaking of awesome things coming up, we've got our next Amplifiers immersion ahead in a few weeks in July. If you have been considering joining Amplifiers and going deeper on fantastic conversations like this in real-world leadership skills that can help you lead to a whole new different level, then Amplifiers might be for you. Check it out at zoerouth.com/amplifiers-program, and you can get all the details there. We would love to have you on board. We have a virtual group as well as a live group in Canberra. And as we start to open up, hopefully in other parts around the country as well. Okay, that's it from me today. I hope you're having a spectacular day wherever you are in the world. And in the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast with leadership expert Zoe Routh. For more about people stuff and to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.